at all.
But the intention is definitely to point a finger at everything around it. All of us are responsible for this particular shitstorm. That if you're thinking or looking for an origin story of a bad guy, this guy has all the ingredients.
He has all the ingredients.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're watching it, it's like literally that.
Yeah.
He has all the ingredients, and then you realize that that's probably a lot more people in this country have that story. You know?
Yeah.
Send a message to the aliens on one of those rovers. If you come here, news is not where you learn anything.
Anica talks about aliens literally
All the time.
in every single episode. Like from them having like.
She's found a way in here also.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Don't Run Into Class, a podcast hosted by thecitizen.in. I'm Gayeti.
And I'm Anica.
And Anica, what are we chatting about today?
Today we are chatting with a director, the director of Indian Predator, The Butcher of Delhi, a 3-part docuseries on Netflix. Did you catch it?
Anica, if I hadn't seen it, I don't think we'd still be friends.
That is
You have
true.
been talking about it since it came out.
That is true. And I'm so happy to welcome Ayesha. Hi Ayesha. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Ayesha, we are so interested in understanding not only this particular work that you have done, but also your past work. But I want to begin with one particular very direct question. Is there a definition of a serial killer?
I mean, so that you define a serial killer by the fact that they commit a series of crimes that are similar in a modus operandi to the previous one, right? Like, so that is the definition of a serial killer. So multiple crimes that follow a certain pattern is the conventional understanding. But then you can dig further, and there are things that what are the urges, what are the motivations, what are the modus operandi, different things that sort of define serial killers. But broadly, that is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got into this, I watched it in one sitting. It was very interesting. Also, it was about Delhi, so
Yeah.
it was even more closer to home.
Yeah.
I had my dog sleeping on the bed with me.
Same. That's why I
Yeah.
actually didn't watch it for that long, because I was like, my dog tries to like leave the room when I put him in, so I have to make sure he's there throughout the night. But for me, I think it was very interesting because I didn't even know of this story. I've lived in Delhi my entire life, have grown up here.
Yeah.
And this is not far back in history or anything of the sort. It's fairly recent.
No.
And it's a very interesting case, and I didn't know about it. I want to know, Ayesha, what made you choose this story? Like, how did you come across it? Why did you decide to?
Actually, this is one of the reasons why I was so into this story. But Vice and Netflix decided to do this umbrella series called Indian Predator. And then there was a pool of stories that were in different stages of development and research. And when I was brought onto the project, a bunch of them were we were looking at and reading up about and things like that. And then there's a process of filtration that you go through for each story, which is like, how filmable is it? Do you have access to talking heads? Are they good, reliable narrators? What kind of archival material do you have to rely on? So, based on a lot of these kind of things, this story became quite rich in that way. And I think what I was really interested in, being from Delhi, somebody who's really into crime and studying crime, I had never heard of this.
You hadn't heard of it until you came across it?
I hadn't heard of it. And it is not ancient history. It's a time where we did have the 24-hour news cycle. So it was definitely something that fell off the cycle. It was not there. And it's audacious, right? It's like somebody throwing the gauntlet to the police in their backyard. So I was amazed. I was like, how is this that we don't, and that becomes one of the themes in the series that we talk about, right? Like, it's like, why is it missed? Why is it that he's an invisible man killing invisible people, and therefore it's not people like us, and therefore it doesn't bother us? So I mean, those are the areas of.
Yeah. And you said you have an interest in crime, like
Yes.
That's your background as well?
No, it's not my background. I'm just generally like quite intrigued by true crime, and I spend a lot of my time like listening to podcasts or reading.
I love it.
True crime is having a moment, right?
It is
Yeah.
really
suddenly-
the main thing these days on podcasts.
Because I'm
for
watching
sure.
only Murders in the Building right
Yeah.
now.
Oh, that's fine.
I mean, like when you have series on like HBO where the protagonist is a podcaster talking about true crime, then true
Exactly.
crime has like but I wouldn't say it's like a really new thing, because true crime has been big. 70s, 80s in different forms.
Yeah.
We didn't have podcasts
Like
then.
the story of Charles Manson, remember?
Yeah.
That was the story
Yeah.
of the hippie.
Yeah.
But this is another question for Ayesha before we get into Chandrakant Jha's story
Yeah.
and your sort of experience here. Is that all of our associations with serial killers
Yeah.
is from the West?
Yeah.
Like Mindhunters.
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
guys have seen that. All the well-known serial killers who are pretty much now part of popular culture.
Yeah.
All in the West, which made me actually almost believe that we don't really have serial killers here. In fact, in your docuseries, a couple of the cops and others even say that there are parallels to this in the West, but
Yeah.
it doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, after all your research, would you agree with that? Would you say that serial killers are largely a Western phenomenon, or is it as pervasive over here?
I think so. If we go back a bit, so I think serial killers are definitely a product of the environment that they come from. And if we study the American serial killers, it was like sort of traumatic childhoods out of families that had come through the post-war era, right? Like, so American soldiers and people who'd come back, and then so-called like sort of traumatic households, and through that was born like kids who were probably traumatized, just broadly, right? So if you're a product of your environment, are we saying that there's no violence in India? There's a lot of violence in our homes. It's very normalized. It's a different kind of violence, right? I think there are serial killers. I don't think that they are caught. I don't think the system has enough capability to track and follow and talk to each other as departments, and really, sort of nab serial killers. I mean, I don't think our states talk to each other.
Yeah.
So if you look at serial killers and you're going to imagine that they only operate in one pin code in Delhi and therefore they'll be caught, good luck, But like, yeah, I mean, I think that I think our systems are too stretched. I think there's a crime, there's a body. If you need to catch the culprit, you've caught the culprit and you've put it in jail. There's no connecting the dots further and beyond that to understand.
Really, I thought from all my training of the police I've gotten from this famous show called CID. You watched it?
Yeah.
So I thought the solution to all of interdepartmental and solving a crime is Daya, phone records nikalo, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I gotta say something, because when Gayeti said about serial killers not being a phenomenon, and it even being addressed in your show, but then I think you started something, because yours was the first of its kind that I watched, which was on a serial killer.
Yeah.
And then recently I watched Delhi Crime. That the latest one is also on a kind of a serial killer or impersonation of an old serial killer gang that existed.
Yeah, so they're there.
Yeah, they're there.
Yeah.
So I it's quite incredible, because the story, the Indian story, and also both shows had a similarity of a nobody killing a nobody,
Right.
that in that landscape,
Right.
and it totally qualifies your thought of how they are a product of the environment and the social injustice, a common thread of social injustice. And the other thing that I think we wanted to talk about was their relationship with their parents,
Right.
So what I want to actually understand from you through the course of your research, you really got into the mind of the person, the mind of the case. So, two-part question. First, what was it that you found out? And second, did you meet anyone from the family of this particular...
Okay, so, when we got the case files, we knew who the killer is. So, this is not a whodunit. It's not structured like a whodunit. In episode 1, you know who's done it, right? When you present the story in this form, then you have to answer the questions that are going to come up in your audience's minds, right? And what is the first question that's going to come up, even for me when I read it off the page, is why? Why would somebody do this? What makes somebody do this? So I think it's more answering those questions that you start to open up layers to figure out why and how do things happen, because For me, it's hard to believe that somebody is just born downright evil and, you know, they're going to go on a rampage to kill multiple people. So that is the starting point to start to ask those questions. About the family, so, you know, I think what sort of jumped out at us when we did visit Bihar is that our sense of life and security and violence in urban bubbles of safety and security are very different from what is the reality in places like rural Bihar. The value of life is a totally different concept to what we have here, right? It was like a really harsh cold winter, and there are children who are like 8 months on the roadside, right? Like with the cattle in biting cold fog. So, I mean, imagine an 8-month-old on the street, right? Of any of our friends as kids. So this the idea of how precious life is a different thing. So lives are more violent, I would say. I think they are immediately confronted with a lot more harshness because of the level of poverty. Climate conditions are not fun. There's a drought annually. More than 50% of the state has to travel to different states to make any kind of living. Even then, they're the bottom of the bottom, right? So I think just the nature of life is so much more traumatic on a daily level that I think that is where, I mean, you think like a mother who has had 7-8 children can barely feed them. Each one is probably looking after the next one.
Yeah.
You know, so
and growing up is hard, right? That's why I
Yeah.
wanted to.
But you know,
also
I have that in my notes, like, you know, brutality of life, kind
Yeah.
of like circle, because, I mean, of course, nobody's here going to sit and condone the actions of a serial killer, but you have to, like, when you tell your story, the things that do stand out are, of course, like, neglect as a child, a very, very difficult sort of upbringing. Coming to a city where then he's like, you know, Chandrakant is
Brutalized.
attacked, brutalized.
Yeah.
When he retaliates in another incident, he's slapped with a false case.
Yeah.
And not only him, but his wife are arrested.
Yeah.
Then a cop tortures him in jail.
Yeah.
And then he comes out like sort of like already
the audacity, also the way he spoke,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
to the media, for
The media,
example,
yeah.
he was just like, you do what you want, but I am telling, this is my game now.
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah.
my time. right?
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think also like the link that you're trying to make is that if you're thinking or looking for an origin story of a bad guy, this guy has all the
he
ingredients.
has all the ingredients.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're watching it, it's like literally that.
Yeah.
He has all the ingredients, and then you realize that that's probably a lot more people in this country have that story, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think for me, I didn't want you to think that, oh my God, let's look at the other Bihari outside our window with weird like lenses,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's not the intention.
At all.
But the intention is definitely to point a finger at everything around it. All of us are responsible for this particular shitstorm that's created. You know, like it's from the justice system to the police system to the social system to like poverty to like our cities to the way you know, like it's all of it together. And let's look at let's point a finger everywhere, because then that is the scariest part, right? Like of how do you point? It's easy and convenient to point a finger in one place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, I want to just sort of come back to earlier thing that you'd said as well about why in India, you know, we don't necessarily connect the dots, because
Yeah.
once you've solved a case, you're like done with it. The cops don't have the time.
Yeah.
Even this case, the reason why that there was at least some pressure is because that letter got leaked to the media. So
Yes.
it became a bit of a, you
Yes.
know, a media
Yeah.
case where there was pressure on the cops to try and solve it.
Yeah.
But in your documentary, like the cops say that, you know, we have 400, 500 unidentified bodies, but we don't know who the murderer is and we don't know who the victim is.
Yep.
And that's the reality. And once they've solved a case, they don't need to necessarily look beyond that particular case.
That's right.
Which is why in your third episode, when you go to rural Bihar
Yeah.
and you speak to people there, most of whom say that, you know, this guy he's killed people here.
Yeah.
The cops you were saying turned around and said, wait, why are you even in rural? Why are you they were surprised you were connecting those dots.
Yeah, because you know, for them the case is closed.
Yeah.
He's in jail.
Yeah.
What are
that
you
comes
doing?
on them, right?
Why?
badly.
Well, does it come badly, or they actually just like, what is the point? Why are you, I mean, he's in jail, so what is the point of your investigation or what you're doing? Because, like, he may have. But the 3 that we got him for, see, they are very concerned with, these are the 3 that we've got a charge sheet about. How do we put him in jail?
Yeah.
That's the area of, that's how much they're concerned. They're not concerned beyond that, how many more he's killed, how many more he may not have killed. Because for them, that means they now have to prove it in court.
Yeah.
They don't have the bandwidth.
And how was it, like, I mentioned this before, how was it going to Bihar and talking to these people? Like, as you uncovered, I'm sure you were uncovering first-hand information that wasn't known to anyone before, right? Because you extended your research in that direction. How was it? How did you feel? Like, I want to hear about you when you confronted this really harsh reality. You know, I do want to take a segue from a little story that I experienced, and I'll tell you how I felt. I had a lovely boy working for me here in Delhi, and he had worked with our family, and sweetest boy used to cook the nicest dal, you know. And one day I walked into my kitchen, and you've met him actually, Kalu. I walked into my kitchen, Karlu was his name. He was howling, and I said, what happened? And he told me that he got a call from his dad. His sister had recently gotten married. The dad had gone to meet his sister, and the new husband had beaten up his father very badly publicly. And he was howling because completely dishonored, right? So that feeling of dishonored had affected him so badly. So he said, I need leave. I need to go to my village right now. I said, okay, sure, but what are you going to do? What's your plan? Do you know what he said to me? He said, I want to kill him. And I got so frightened. And I said, I can't let you go. I simply cannot let you go. And then I simply did not also know how to talk to him. I mean, from what context am I going to explain? Obviously, I can tell him it's illegal. You know, it's, you know, I know you've been dishonored. But I, for the first time, realized how honor can have different grades of reaction from people. And I'm not qualified to understand his emotions right now. I just can't.
I mean, see, so if you watch the series, a lot of what Chandrakant is doing is it's a desperate cry for attention. It's the cry to try and establish his identity as somebody, right? What is his reality? That he was born in a very poor family with many kids, probably grew up feeling that he was somebody, came out into the real world, realized not, and on top of that got a sequence of events that like just brutalized him and ruined his life, where he's going on screaming and trying to catch people's attention, right? So this need and this search for identity rooted in our Indian family system, which then when mixed with things, an idea like honor and respect. Honor is what? You're trying to protect your identity, right? My identity as a man, my identity as a Hindu, my identity as a whatever, right? So I think these are the particular things that cause the confusion, that cause the mix, that in that reality is very much the reality, maybe very removed for people like us who sit here in South Delhi.
What I thought was, you know, when you have nothing, all you have is honor, right? All you have is honor and respect. And if you lead a good life, then you feel you deserve better. If you don't have material things in your life, because that's the only asset of your life. And certainly it's connected to identity. But when that is disrobed, you know, we are seeing absolutely terrible reactions.
I mean, like, it's different triggers for different people, and for different cultures and family. But that's honor and identity are huge in India. I mean, as we know, for many things. But you were asking about going to Bihar, and traveling to Bihar was like, it was unbelievable as an experience to confront that reality of the place that Chandrakant comes from, to be in a village where almost every family in that village is some way was related to the violence that he either perpetrated by killing somebody or by actually being a part of his violence. So it was incredibly eerie in that sense, because we were meeting a lot of people. Our research team, which was incredible and led by Nandita, did an amazing job to find us the new material that we did find, and even just sort of uncovering it was almost too good to be true, because like we found this like beaten up photo album, and then we found negatives that hadn't been developed. And I remember like we found an app that would develop negatives, and we were all sitting in this cold car, and like we were seeing the image appear, and we were like, what is this, because for the first time, so you read a case file and you say that okay, somebody was chopped up and hacked, right? And for the first time you see the image of how it happened, the moment before it happened, which is, I mean,
I had to pause the documentary when that came because she flashed the photo once and it just seemed like three guys like sitting, you know. But then you suddenly notice the uncomfortable angle and then certain things, and then you're like, oh my god, I got the heebie-jeebies so bad that I was frightened when you found.
But this is probably a documentary filmmaker's like, I don't know, this is probably some kind of a
like
weird rush
how
for a documentary filmmaker in a perverse way.
I mean, you know, I like actually genuinely like I am so lucky to have found this story and the people who led to this story and all of this kind of stuff. But when we were there in that moment, I think I remember like the whole crew was just, I mean, we were unable to process it because everybody was in the room when people are telling you about the crimes, right? But like to see that image from just before, probably something that was going to happen, we've heard talked about. It was quite sobering, and obviously the next day you have to get up and shoot again, so you just like get on with it. But yeah, it was quite incredible.
So a related question kind of is like, you said earlier that I don't want you watching the documentary to turn around and say, okay, everybody who matches, let's say, Chandrakant's profile, I want to view them with suspicion. So that's obviously not the goal, right?
No.
But let's say someone who's involved in making it and who's involved in true crime, one aspect is like, I mean, how do you sleep at night? Like, are you more trusting of people now that you know that maybe what goes into making a serial killer? Or are you like just constantly on edge? I don't know, this might be a very silly question.
How does it affect you?
I want to know how it affects you.
So I'll tell you, so like when we were making it, which was 2 years ago, because we were making it in 2020, it was quite tough because I have to say, like, also when we're getting the information and we're getting stuff that is outside what we had planned, and it's new information. So how do you talk about it to anyone in your life? You can't.
Yeah.
We literally did not know. I mean, at least I had no language to talk about it. So when you go out, you're kind of a little bit of a boring person because you like really don't have anything to say. Because your head is somewhere else and you're sort of processing a lot of it. And even with my partner, who in a very jumbled way, I would try to explain what. And I was like, okay, we just leave it. Whatever. And then I think it was the actual process of editing and putting it together and making sense out of the material, which is what gave me a language to be able to, okay, this is what it is. But by the time you all saw it, it's 2 years later for me, so I've already processed it and I'm like okay with it, and I'm like, so I'm not if you're asking like, am I traumatized and on edge? Not right now.
But you were.
But was I really like affected by it at a certain stage? But like, it was so much about telling this particular story that I don't think I'm not like I'm not in fear of either the city or people, or I think this is a story that's very particular to him.
It is, but I mean, of course it is a very particular story. I mean, it takes more than just your circumstance. But is this a common theme in all serial killers, a neglected, deprived childhood? Because I mean, from whatever, again, my knowledge of serial killers is literally popular culture, so I have to admit that.
I mean, that's most of our, unless you met a serial killer, and heaven forbid that ever happened.
You might not even know, but that's not even the point. Like, there's an academic interest in it, which, like, of course, but for me, it's just popular culture, and that seems to be something I've taken away, that, it is a very deprived, neglected childhood, usually, some kind of trauma in your childhood. Parents or society, and insignificance, needing to feel important, a weird kind of a power trip.
I think those are generally understood to be markers for this, but like on the flip side, many people will say that many people have that kind of existence and they don't turn to serial killing. So it's obviously a lot more than just those things, because those things can probably lead you to feel a certain way, but then the act of it is a different kind of psychopathy or whatever you want to call it. But even in that case, even with Chandrakant's familial situation, I know that a lot of the villagers do point at his mother, but I would still, that's a moment that I struggled with as well, because I was like, I'm not here to put blame on the mother,
Yeah.
right? Like, we don't know her circumstances. What we are being told is by the men of the village. That is their version of the story. We really do not know what she went through to raise a family like this. I don't know. So what are her compulsions and what made her a certain way, and what was that way? We know that even like, forget village rumors, what our rumors in our world are like, and how much they can magnify, right? So I'm not here to blame the mother either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that does come across in the way you've told the story. Like, you sort of like not pinpointed any one reason. It's just sort of a multitude of things that happened in his life, which could or could not have contributed to it. But while watching it, I did think of the mother figure, because again, from popular culture, like if you look at any of these American serial killers, most of them do talk about a very complicated relationship with their mother, more than the father. So I mean, again, that's of course maybe a conversation for.
And it doesn't mean that the either is actually an evil person or a bad person. It's just complicated relationships have such complex reasons. But the common factor is it didn't work out between them, right? And that's why one is really angry about it. And I agree with you. I've seen that consistently.
I mean, I think in the American serial killers, there's a lot of daddy issues as well. It's not just mommy issues. I think it's both.
Yeah.
Daddy issues is a trending topic in America. Have you heard about Elon Musk and his daddy issues? I mean, that was quite funny.
Yeah.
I also wanted to understand in your interest in true crime.
Yeah.
And everything, just to understand serial killers in India. Are there any other stories that we don't know of that you could tell us about?
I mean, I haven't done so much research, but like, I'm sure there's so many. I'm sure there
Tell
are.
us a few.
I mean,
anything you would particularly like to work on, a story you would like to tell that you sort of came across that maybe wasn't the lead story because the sources were not there, or the puzzles didn't like the pieces.
There are a bunch of them. About 2 more that are coming as a part of Indian Predator. You may have heard of one, and you probably have not heard of the other. They're not serial killers, but a different kind of crime. Those are super interesting stories. And I have looked at a bunch of crimes, and they are interesting to me also. Are like what kind of goes missed in our reporting, like even the way we report stuff. Part of the problem is that we don't tell the story well enough.
We don't.
If you read the reportage about the story, you'd be like, what is this? And that is also interesting to me, because you pick up any newspaper and you go to page 4 or 5, and small little blurbs, if you start to imagine the story behind it, could be insane. If you think about it. So I mean, there are many. I mean, I can't name one or two, but like not working on a series, but there are a couple of that I've been reading, but I want to keep them a little bit tight so that it's a surprise for people.
You still haven't told us a story, Ayesha.
No.
Tell us any other story.
No. I'm not here to do
The
that.
one that you jumped, the one you're not considering to.
But why would I tell that story? It's not fun.
That's the next.
I mean, that's just like a Wikipedia article.
No.
Check this out on Wikipedia.
No.
That is what one of my friends actually, when I was very young, so this is what got me into reading about serial killers. This friend of mine, Akshay from Pune, that you used to know about, he got into it and he started, reading all the books and watching all the movies and then he used to send me Wikipedia articles. He's like, read about this.
But listen, speaking of Wikipedia and the media, like it actually kind of like reminds me of an incident. There was a murder at a family friend's home, and we were not being able to speak to the family friend, and our only sort of source of this is like last year or 2 years ago, and our only source of information was the media. And the media had like literally portrayed like one of the living family members as the murderer. Like literally it was written like it was fact.
Right.
And obviously the story when it came out was the complete opposite. It was somebody completely external, completely different motive. But if we hadn't like spoken to the people who were involved, we would have never known. If we went by those media reports were like written as fact. As if it was, they knew who the
I mean,
was.
it's terrible. It's
terrible.
I mean, like the state of what is happening with our reporting and journalism around crime is horrible, because once that information is out there, nobody is going to go back and read 1 year later what was the real result of that crime and what actually the court said or what the judgment was. In their head, it's going to be that person.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's never going to, like if you actually, like I worked on the Arushi and Hemraj case,
Yes. Let's
and
talk about
and
that.
if you ask people around you who did it,
Yeah.
you will be shocked at the answers you get.
Yeah.
It's like they'll say whatever. They have no idea what is the status, because that's just imprinted in your head now.
Yeah. It is, and that's
Yeah.
actually, and in fact, that reading these news reports is what it reminded me of the Arushi and Hemraj case, because I was like, now I finally know that what was coming out in the media was probably completely conjecture,
Yeah.
and it was written as fact. And
Yeah.
this is the problem with crime reporting in the country.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like this is the problem with sensationalism in the country.
Yeah.
You want to read, you want the clickbait, you
Yeah.
want people to go click on that article, or you want to
True.
sell
Yeah.
a newspaper copy or whatever it is. And the reporter on the ground is also, wanting to sell a story.
Yeah.
Because,
Getting his
viral
story
books
picked
for
up.
him.
I mean, that's his or her own struggle. Somebody pick up the story. It's like
No,
I'm not one for calling for regulations, or because I feel like anyway there's too many regulations, especially when you talk about OTT platforms and what censor board and things like that. But if you look at it, the percentage of the market or the living rooms that the OTTs get into compared to how many are watching the news, so-called news, right?
Yeah.
News needs some, because it's fiction right now.
It is fiction.
It's total fiction.
I mean, it's a
People
panel
are-
discussion in its format.
No,
generally.
And
People are saying whatever.
Yeah.
Kuch
They
bhi.
say kuch bhi, and they're like,
And actually, newspapers and the news media is supposed to be the first draft of history. It's supposed to be recorded facts,
No, it's not.
And it's
Yeah.
and even
Like-
Chandrakant says that, right, to a reporter. He says, you guys can't even get the story right.
Yeah.
We should
You
send a
didn't
message
even know where
to-
the body was found.
Yeah.
We
Like,
should
he
send a
says
message to the aliens on one of those rovers. If you
Anica-
come here, news is not where you learn anything.
Anica talks about aliens literally in
All the
each and
time.
every single episode. From them having
she's
put
found
up
a way in
stuff
here also. The most
Because first draft, imagine if someone from some amazing planet came in, let me figure out what these humans are doing, and they checked out Republic or some other channel, they'd be like,
we are leaving.
whoa, I'm going.
We are
I'm gone."
leaving.
Yeah.
No, so that is a huge problem. In fact,
Yeah.
the role of the media in sensationalizing crime and sort of distorting it and even distorting public perception
Yeah.
does definitely seem to be a problem. So we're kind of running out of time. Anika,
Yes.
do you have any? Because
Many, but we'll keep it for off camera. I don't think she's gonna answer on camera.
Anika wants to just basically have you solve some.
Yeah, I was like, can we go on nighttime crime patrol? Can I be your Daya?
I think you're the most sort of fanatic about true crime person that I've met after me. I think I'm just okay.
No, I think I'm just very thirsty for true crime based in South Asia that maybe beyond CID, just a little bit more, a little bit more based in police files and stuff like that. That's why I really enjoyed your work, and I enjoyed the new recent work that has been coming out. I mean, it was great.
I think coming back to reporting, that is a big part of the problem, that we're not reporting it well. We're not telling the stories of our culture, of our space, of crime well. We're not doing it. So I think it's important to do it now. Yeah.
Okay, you guys can enjoy your true crime. I don't know if I'm revisiting this subject anytime soon. I literally I told my husband, I was like, you can't leave the room today. The dog can't leave the room today. No one can leave. But it was very interesting for someone who's not into true crime as a genre. You have over here one person who's your literally
Who's a
Fact,
nut.
actually.
and somebody who was Anika's been telling me watch it, and I was resisting.
Yeah.
It was a very powerfully told story. So I do
Brilliant.
definitely think more stories
Thank
like
you.
this need to come out.
Congratulations.
Thank you both.
You did such a great
Thank you.
story.
So everyone
Thank you.
should watch it.
Yeah.
Because we haven't recapped it at all in this episode.
It's on Netflix, everyone. Yeah. The Indian Predator, the Butcher of Delhi.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Ayesha.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ayesha.
Thank you both.